Hey guys, this is John. This is a climbing the rating ladder game. 20 minutes per side against All Is Lost in the End, rated 1032. Very nihilist username. Okay, and my opponent opens with d4. So let's play knight f6. I played an Arena Kings earlier today. It was a 1-minute Arena Kings, and it went pretty well. I feel good. I feel my tactical chess juices flowing. So I'm going to play a Nimzo Indian if I can, which is an opening I don't really play. But it is a principal chess opening. But okay, my opponent plays knight f3 on move 3. Now I have lots of options. You can play d5, looking for a Queen's Gambit declined. You can play c5 if you want a Benoni. There's b6, the Queen's Indian defense, which I think I'll go for b6. This is one of the most high-quality replies to knight f3. A lot of people who play knight f3, they don't like to get pinned with knight c3, bishop b4. So play b6, wait for that knight to commit itself to c3, and then go bishop b4. White might put a stop to that entirely. They might play a3. It's a popular line. g3 is one of the main lines here. That's actually what I play as white, looking to fianchetto the light square bishop. Hope everyone is doing well. I haven't recorded anything specifically for YouTube lately, but I had a little free time tonight. Oh, and my opponent types in the chat, he says, climbing the rating ladder series. You bet. You bet all is lost in the end, so give it your best crack. And I'm telling him I'm posting this to YouTube right afterwards. I usually get these up pretty quick. So the last climbing the rating ladder video game that I played was maybe about a month ago. And unfortunately, that player turned out to be cheating. So those of you who remember watching that video and being suspicious of that opponent, yeah, you were right. And I was also suspicious of him during the course of the game. Chess.com ended up banning his account about a week later after looking into the matter. If you go back and watch that video, I actually thought about making a video just sort of explaining why I was suspicious, although I didn't mention it at the time, because I do believe that people should be given the benefit of the doubt. There's not a whole lot of point in accusing someone and then being wrong. I mean, that's just harmful to that person and their reputation. And even if I'm like 90% sure I'm right, I don't really see the value in doing that. So these sites are very good at catching cheaters. If someone is cheating, I believe the vast majority of the time they do get found out, and indeed this player was. But yeah, if you go back and watch that video, right around the time that he sacrificed his queen and began to set up this fortress was when I started getting suspicious, because he just played extremely well, very accurately and fast after that. Okay, so now my opponent plays knight c3. I'll play bishop b4. So this pin is a little annoying for white because white has to decide whether they want to allow bishop takes c3 check at any given time. I probably won't play it yet, even though this does double up white's pawns. I am going to try to wait and just develop my pieces before playing that move. A lot of times white will end up playing a3, and you can then play bishop takes c3 without having lost any time. You know, white's forcing you to play a move that you want to play anyways. But okay, so bishop e2, that is a little unusual. Typically that bishop goes to d3 instead. I mean, this doesn't look like necessarily a bad move, but because that bishop isn't on d3, I'm considering perhaps knight e4. Maybe I can jump in and just see how he responds to that. I can also just castle. Is another strong candidate move here. Yeah, I've played the position after 6 bishop d3 many times myself from the white side, so it's weird looking at this from the black side. So usually when your opponent plays the first move out of your book, so your book moves that you're used to, that you've memorized or looked at previously, you want to pause and think for a while, try to gather yourself. So that's why I'm considering knight e4. I mean, if this was a blitz game, I would just castle without really thinking about it. Knight e4 is definitely intriguing. Yeah, you know, let's see how he reacts to it. So put a little pressure on that knight. I think queen c2 is the best reaction, attacking the knight on e4, but mostly just defending c3. I guess the knight on e4 really isn't attacked because I am defending it with my bishop on b7. But yeah, queen c2 would be the standard reaction here. And I might look to prop this knight up with f5. Probably also wouldn't be terrible for white to play bishop d2. I mean, it looks a little passive to me. Defending in that way, it gives me the option of knight takes d2 or just damaging his pawn structure, but that could be played. So this is 20 minutes per side, no increment here. I was just perusing the open challenges, and this was one of the games that was available. So no increment. If it comes down to it, could be a time scramble. You never know. Now at this player's level, so he's 1,000. It's an achievement for him to be able to play a game without making catastrophic blunders. I say that just in all seriousness, no offense to opponents in this rating range. If you're in this rating range, just know that that's the truth. I firmly believe that in coaching lots of players at this rating range too. If you can play a game without hanging something significant, that is a big achievement at this level, because players like this just are not capable of playing complete games where they're able to do that very often. And I firmly believe, as I've discussed in my Chess Fundamentals series, the very first video in the Chess Fundamentals series was on undefended pieces, but I firmly believe you can't really progress in chess until you get a handle on the blunders. And I'm talking just giving pieces away, just moving your knight to a square and your opponent can just take that knight, or your opponent makes a one-move threat and you simply don't respond to it. You just can't have that if you want to become a better chess player. So you have to be self-critical. You have to analyze your games after the fact without an engine first, and add in the engine as a last step. It would benefit a lot of you to look through your games and annotate them with a program like SCID, S-C-I-D. It's an open source program where you can add in your own annotations, save it all in one place. Okay, my opponent plays bishop d2, so he does break the pin, and he defends the knight on c3 sufficiently. So here I have a choice. So I can go after his bishop here if I want and gain the bishop pair, but I kind of like taking here. I kind of like just capturing there. I don't want to castle because he is threatening to play knight takes e4. As I said, he's breaking the pin. And then my bishop on b4 would be undefended. So my candidate moves here, the moves I'm considering are this and this. I mean, you could maybe add in knight takes c3. That is a forcing move, but mostly knight takes d2 or bishop takes c3. I think I'm going to go for bishop takes c3 because I'm kind of curious which way he's going to recapture. If he takes with the bishop, I might very well take again. I could definitely do that. Knight takes d2, queen takes d2 just doesn't seem to pose him that many problems. I do have the bishop pair, but I think white has pretty good control of the center. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for bishop takes c3 and just see which way he recaptures. And I believe he should recapture with the bishop. Because if he takes with the pawn, that bishop doesn't look very impressive on d2. So yeah, he correctly takes with the bishop. So yeah, let's just take this way. Otherwise, I don't think my early knight sally into e4 here really achieves much. So yeah, I'll just go like this and now castle. And I'm hoping to play against his doubled c-pawns later in the game. Let's play d6. It's a helpful move. Controls the e5 square. And now because he doesn't have the bishop on d3, it's a little harder for him to achieve e4, which is an advance that white usually likes to get in. Okay, so my knight is still sitting here undeveloped on b8. I want to get it into the game. I know a lot of times that black plays knight c6 to a5 and tries to bring about long-term pressure on this pawn, but I think in this situation, probably going to d7 makes more sense. That's just my instinct. I mean, to me, it looks like a more harmonious development than putting the knight on c6 because you want your minor pieces to communicate with each other, and knight d7 does not block my light square bishop. So I'm kind of leaning that direction. I could play c5 as well. c5 is definitely interesting. And then play the knight to c6 to a5. That's another move that is commonly employed because c5 stops white from playing c5 if they ever want to try to undouble their pawns. White might even be able to sacrifice a pawn to undouble them and give me double isolated pawns. So yeah, those are my candidates right now. c5, Knight d7, also knight c6 with this plan. c5 might pose a few more problems than knight d7. I mean, I can still play knight d7 after c5, but it would be interesting to do this. Then here, maybe look to play rook c8 and see how he reacts to the pressure down here. If he takes, I'm not too bothered because I can take back and he'll have double isolated c-pawns. Yeah, let's go for that. c5. But I think knight d7 was also okay too. Knight d7, queen e7, e5, or knight f6 into e4. Send another knight into e4. Hope everyone's having a good fall so far. The World Chess Championship is rapidly approaching. Just a reminder, I think it starts on November 9th. I'm recording this on October 22nd, 2018. Carlsen Caruana, probably, hopefully, the most competitive world championship in a while. The Karyakin-Carlsen match was close, but I always felt like Magnus was clearly the better player. I think Fabiano definitely has his chances this time around. So bishop d3. Okay, so he's improving the bishop. I like that move for him because it wasn't doing a whole lot on e2. He did play rook e1, so that kind of hinted at the fact that he wants to go e4. I still think knight c6 is what I should play here. You know, when your opponent plays this move, you got to watch the h7 pawn because he is attacking it. You especially have to keep in mind that your opponent might have a Greek gift style sacrifice. Bishop takes h7, knight g5, but notice I'm controlling the g5 square with my queen. So I'm not scared of that. If he sets up a battery, queen-bishop battery, putting the queen and the bishop on the same diagonal, I can at that point figure out how to defend either g6 or h6, one of the two moves. So yeah, I think knight c6 just looks good here. Let's do it. I do block my bishop, so, you know, that's, as I was saying, my one misgiving about putting the knight on c6 versus d7, but given that this knight is bound for a5 with pressure here, I don't think this temporary lack of harmony will matter much. The position's relatively closed still. It's not an open tactical position, so blocking a piece like that is not a big deal for the moment. Okay, so there he goes. He sets up that battery. But for me, I kind of like the fact that his queen is on this file, because if ever I play rook c8 in the future, even though there's several pawns in the way, I might be able to take advantage of that. We'll see. Okay, so here, do I play h6 or g6? This is actually a classic dilemma. G6 makes some sense because when your opponent has a remaining bishop, they've traded one of their bishops and they have a remaining bishop on a color complex. Usually you want to put your pawns on that same color complex so as to block it. That's a good rule of thumb. But I think h6 is also a pretty good idea. I mean, g6, though, I don't have to worry about sacrifices necessarily. And if e4, I can always meet it with e5 even. Maybe I should play g6. This is a close one. I'm not sure it actually matters that much. But yeah, if I play h6, then his bishop has more free reign. And also, I haven't solved my back rank issue. If you have a choice between these two moves and everything else is equal in the position, I think g6 is better. So I'm going to play that because later on when you play king g7 and get your king off the back rank, the king will be controlling a bunch of squares, and it'll also still be keeping an eye on the h-pawn and the f-pawn for you. Whereas if you play h6 and then play your king to h7 in some sort of endgame, I know that's not possible here. This is the bishop, but if you were to do that instead, then that f-pawn can be undefended in some circumstances. So everything else being equal, I think the g6 pawn is a better plan. Okay, and he plays rook ad1. So he's lining his rook up with my queen. Looks like a good developing move to me. Thinking about knight a5. I have to contemplate what happens if he takes here and tries to pry open the d-file right away. I mean, that's definitely a possible concern, but I think I can take back with the b-pawn pretty comfortably. So I still like to look at knight a5. Knight a5 with an eye towards playing rook c8, bishop a6, really hammering that pawn. The other move that comes to mind is queen e7. Flexible move, just get the queen off of the same file as the rook. Get ready to play e5 maybe. But knight a5, I don't see anything wrong with that move. Looks quite appealing. Knight a5, he might play knight d2 maybe and try to go knight b3. That is something I should be aware of. Looking to swap. I had maybe bishop c6 there. I can try to pin him with bishop a4. Yeah, close call here. Bit tough to say which one is best. I think I'm going to go queen e7. I'll stay flexible, because knight a5, knight d2, I just wasn't quite sure how to continue there. If he spots that knight b3 is a good idea, so I think queen e7 is fine. It's sort of a mental load off my shoulders, too, because I don't have to worry about the discoveries on the d file, so I think it makes sense. Allislostintheend is playing well here. I like my position a bit more just because of the structure and the clarity of the plan, but he's playing very well through 14 moves, managing his clock pretty well too. I'm very curious what he'll do now, because to me it looks like he's made all of sort of the standard moves in the position. You know, we've got, for instance, the 3 goals in the opening. We're getting into the middle game now, so it's worth recapping the opening briefly. So in the opening, you're usually trying to develop your pieces, control the center, and get your king to safety, which is almost always castling. You know, those are the 3 basic principles of the opening, and he's done all 3 of those things pretty well. But now it's time to find a plan, and I think given his structural issues, it might be tough for him. Okay, he plays h3, so that looks sort of like a semi-waiting move, kind of a useful move. Gives his king some access here, but also it doesn't really help him much in the way of his grander plan. So if I play something like rook c8, again looking to play knight a5 and pressure that pawn, I might just be able to throw the ball back in his court. d5, by the way, if he had played d5, I was just going to play knight here. Was my plan. So let's play rook c8. If he plays e4, I might still play e5. I haven't made up my mind yet. That's a typical reaction to e4, just to stop him from playing e5 and creating 2 points of contact on my pawn structure. He would very much like to open the center. That would be great for him if he's able to do that. He's more centralized than I am. So I could totally see him trying to bring about a plan like that. But I can put a firm stop to it with e4, e5 if he does. Okay, so queen e2. Yeah, I think knight a5. Let's do it. Can still play knight d2 if he wants, but knight a5 seems like the most consistent reply to me. If knight d2, maybe bishop c6, as I was sort of alluding to earlier with the idea knight b3, bishop a4, trying to pin the knight to his rook on d1. Okay, now he advances e4. So again, I have this option, e5. Very interesting move. Also, I could play bishop a6, which contains the concrete threat of taking, and after he recaptures, then winning the c4 pawn. But e5 might be a nice move just to play right now, just to put any stop to his further expansion plans. I give up control of the d5 square, but he's a long way from being able to use that square. I mean, realistically, he needs to bring about that maneuver of the knight to the e3 square to jump in. The knight's about the only piece that could utilize this square. But yeah, I think I should be able to deal with that. Okay, so it's down to either e5 or bishop a6. I think I'm going to play e5. And let's see how he reacts. He might lock the position. He might play d5, but then his minor pieces seem really poorly placed to me, especially his light square bishop. He doesn't want all those pawns on light squares in the center, just forever blocking in his bishop. Admittedly, it will be harder for me to attack his c-pawn if he plays that, but I think I can actually start opening a second front. I might even look to play this f5 break later if he closes the center and try to attack him in 2 directions. So don't be surprised if after d5 I start playing moves like rook ce8, bishop c8, and look for f5. Still keep my knight on a5, kind of maintaining some residual pressure over here, but look to open a second flank. That's often what you do if the center closes up. So in playing e5, I am attacking his pawn on d4 twice, but I'm not really looking to take yet. I'd probably only take, okay, he takes, so let's take back, but I'd probably only take that if I could actually win his c4 pawn after that. It's important to note. Now that he's taken, so he clearly has weak pawns here now. The d-file is opening up, but yeah, those pawns are a liability. I have a much better light square bishop than him. Yeah, if I were him, I would consider moving this bishop now either to c2 or b1. The only legal moves with the bishop, but to make way for the rook. The problem is, though, he might need that bishop there to guard the c4 pawn, so it's tough because when you play a move like that, you're trying to open the file, but in doing so, yeah, he might lack a defender here, so I'm thinking about bishop a6 now, just to try to tie him down to the defense of that pawn. I mean, bishop b3 doesn't look so nice. The only problem with bishop a6 is I do give up control of the d5 square, so maybe I shouldn't hurry to play that. Maybe I should just bring a rook to the center now. That might be wise. Or even play queen e6. Queen e6 is a move that catches my eye too. But I think a rook centralization move, one of these rooks, I'm not sure it matters a whole lot. Maybe I'll use this rook because I don't really see what it's going to do on the c-file anymore. So that rook might be prudent. And if he takes, I take. He can play rook d1. I can take. I feel like he's going to have some trouble, though, very soon, keeping everything together. Okay, so the only downside of bringing a rook to the center is it does give him some easy moves in a row if he does want to trade. But if I feel like those trades benefit me, then I'm going to do it. So yeah, looking at queen e6, looking at bishop a6, and this move. Okay, let's go with the rook centralization. We'll keep the bishop aimed against this pawn for now, and especially controlling the d5 square before committing to this. If the rooks get traded, maybe in the future bishop a6 will be a better idea. I'm a little behind on the clock, but not too bad. If he was more in time pressure, I probably wouldn't have played that move because, like I said, I think it gives him some easy moves here with take and rook d1. But he plays rook c1, which I don't like that move for him. That just seems wrong because his rook really has no future here. Kind of like my rook on the c-file. There's no reason to put it there. Okay, so now I'm not worried about the rook coming here, so I could definitely do this. He might play this rook here in the future, or even that rook back, but I can tie him down to the defense of it. Maybe even get him to play knight d2, which looks kind of awkward. Could also just play a move like rook d6 or d7, look to double up. But even if I double, I'm not really threatening anything yet. So, don't know about that plan. Okay, I think bishop a6 is pretty good though. Let's do it. And I would play bishop b3 to defend if I were him. I think knight d2 is less good because then doubling up makes a lot more sense. Because I'm actually creating a threat when I double up. I'll be attacking his knight on d2 twice. Okay, queen e3. So I think he's writing off this c4 pawn. He's saying, you know what, I'm going to lose that, and I think he's going to go on the counterattack, which is an interesting strategy. I should be able to rebuff this attack pretty easily. I think this is his idea. So if I take, he plays queen h6, I can play this move f6, which is really handy because then I can go queen g7. And also I simultaneously stop him from playing knight g5. For that matter, maybe I should take with the bishop, because taking with the bishop, I don't have to worry about any bishop b3 business, and I'm hitting his a pawn. That might even be better. Yeah, no reason to allow bishop b3, right? Let's take. So up a pawn, attacking this. Gonna meet queen h6 with f6, so it's just handy to have that defensive move in mind if he does play the most aggressive move in the position. Oh, I actually missed his message in the chat earlier. After he asked me if this was climbing the rating ladder, he said, don't beat me too hard. But man, you're playing well. So when you go back and watch this, yeah, I approve of a lot of what you have done here. And, you know, the game's not over yet, but I think perhaps a bit too many moves. Well, I'm even hesitant to say that. I was going to say a bit too many moves without a plan, but I think that middle game is just kind of tough because there isn't a clear plan for white, in my opinion, when you have those double pawns. Maybe you have to take into consideration a bit more what to do when I start attacking your pawn on c4. I don't think giving it up as you did right here was the best strategy. But, you know, I'll reserve most of my remarks until after the game. Okay, so a3, so he just defends. Okay, still considering f6. I also like king g7. King g7 is pretty handy. That just stops queen h6 entirely. So I actually really like the look of that move. I could try to trade some stuff like bishop b3, but I don't think that's really necessary yet. Yeah, let's just play king g7. Stop this move, get the king off the back rank. It's a nice little move. Now, if he puts a rook on d1 trying to contest the file, I might eventually have to play f6. So you could argue that I should have played f6 on the previous move. I might have to play it anyways, we'll see. But reason being, let's say he plays rook d1 here. Let's say rook c to d1. If I want to trade and then bring this rook over, I don't want to lose the pawn on e5 at the end. My queen is the sole defender of e5 right now, so I might need to get this up to help defend, help solidify. I could try to bring my knight back, but he does have bishop a4 if he wants to attack my knight. And I'm still thinking this knight might be bound for c4 in the long run. So for that matter, you know, I could also consider moving this bishop back, which I might very well do now that he's attacking it. Could also move the bishop here. Maybe claim that it's even better on this diagonal. Could also just consider leaving the bishop and let him take, but then I recapture and I hit his a-pawn in the process. But I kind of like my light square bishop. I don't think I really want to trade it. Yeah, let's go here. Blocks my queen from defending this pawn, but he's not hitting it now, so... And if this knight ever moves, I'm going to play knight c4. And next I'm going to try to double up the rooks. That's the plan. Rook d6, rook d8. I can tell I haven't recorded on YouTube in a while because my voice is a little bit hoarse. It's different when you're on Twitch because Twitch, there's more of a staccato rhythm. You're playing, you're looking at the chat, you're talking a little bit. So there's more interruptions. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to respond to this move with knight c4 hitting this. He can go queen c1 and defend, but his queen is so passive there, and I can just double up. So that's looking pretty good. Trading also would have been, pretty good for me. I am up a pawn, solid pawn here, better pawn structure, but I think my knight is so much better than his knight, I don't even need to trade. Okay, now he plays this, but this drops the a3 pawn. And I can take it with tempo, hitting his rook, also eyeing up his bishop. And so let's say he plays rook a1 here. I have a nice little idea. I can play bishop c4, and his queen is unable to defend the bishop because he can't stay on the second rank. He can't go to d1 or d3. So I think that's just winning more material. Okay, so he plays this, so that does defend it. But I can do the same thing, and at the end of the line, I'll have this and then take here. So that's a nice little sequence that I think I don't see a flaw with this. So yeah, let's go with this. His rook is going to be overloaded, trying to defend this, but also trying to defend the knight. And I'm removing a defender on the next move. Yeah, not much to do here. He's just straight losing a piece. Sometimes if you know you're losing a piece, you can get some compensation for it, but yeah, it's just not possible here. His position's too passive. He should move the queen, not sacrifice the queen, but even with this, it's a very clean extra piece and pawn, and I even will control the d-file most likely, further trade downs, advancing the queenside pawns. I think the move rook c1 really got him in trouble, even though he had lost a pawn by that point. Or actually, no, he hadn't lost a pawn yet. I ended up winning that pawn 2 moves later. I'm just looking at the move list right now. But yeah, rook c1 really was the wrong direction for him. Okay, so let's take this, remove the defender. You can see how this king here just really protects some nice key squares. I have f6 overprotected anyways, but it's just nice to not ever have to worry about that or something coming to h6. If you're just worried about a single piece coming in like a queen, it's really nice to have the king just monitoring that square. Okay, so I'm thinking about just c4. I really like the look of that. Anchor that bishop in. Rook d3 could be coming. I want to control d1 too. That's a square he might try to dispute the file on in the future, but so I can double up, just get this rook working. I can advance the pawns. Many ways to convert this to a victory. I think I'll double here. Could play rook d3 directly, but I think doubling is a bit more savvy. Then I'm threatening this. And if he goes back to c1, I would have rook d1. I guess he could play queen e3 back, but maybe this other rook comes in then. But yeah, this move helps in basically every line. So now I could trade off all the rooks with rook d1, but again, rook d3 just looks really, really strong to me. Let's play that first. So queen c1, so yeah, rook d1, or even a move like rook d2, which would totally relegate him to passivity on the second rank. But I think rook d1. is a nice clinical way to do this. Definitely don't mind trading a rook and a bishop for his queen. Then I'll have queen against rook with 2 extra pawns. We like trades when we're just ahead material. Okay, queen b2. So I'm thinking about attacking this queen again so I can go here. His rooks are defending each other. I don't necessarily have to take them right away, but I can play that move, which is going to make him make another really passive move. I can basically box him in with rook a2 after that too, and if he takes, I have check. So yeah, that looks very strong. Yeah, I think rook a2 is working. If I play rook a2, I just have to check whether he can take either piece, either queen takes a2 or rook takes d1. But I think in either case, I'm going to come out material ahead. If rook a2, let's say he takes this way, I wouldn't want to take his rook because then he takes my rook on a2, but I have... no, actually, okay, take. He gets 2 rooks for the queen, in fairness, if he takes that way. I was thinking rook a2, if he took this way, I could take, and then my bishop would be attacking d1, but probably not even necessary to look at that. Queen c5 is also a nice looking move here, threatening a mate in a couple. Yeah, actually, that might be a nice way to bring this to a conclusion. Because I've got this protected a couple times, but if I can set up another threat here, then yeah, it's a checkmate in 2. So let's do that. My queen is no longer defending the pawn on a7, but this is such an immediate threat. It's hard to do much for him. So if rook f1, which I think might be the only move here. Now, rook takes f2 is what I want to play. It looks nice. I'm not sure if it's strictly the best move, but it looks nice. Could also just play rook takes f1. Oh, I have queen takes f2 anyways. It took me a second to see that. If you were screaming at me that I have queen takes f2 here, well, yes, you are right. So actually queen takes f2 is basically an unstoppable threat. But yeah, it took me a second to see that his rook is actually just pinned. I mean, I knew that with rook takes f2, but yeah, I didn't connect it to the queen. Okay, and he resigns. Okay. So thank you for the game. All is lost in the end. I'm going to take a brief look at that. But for his rating, he played very well. And, you know, I'm not just saying that because this happens to be a viewer that I played. This game was not planned, by the way. Again, as I was saying, this is just a random person. But it's nice to know that so many of you guys are out there. But he didn't make a significant mistake until later. And even then, it was sort of this loss of the c-pawn that led to the dominoes falling. And I think that's totally tolerable at the 1,000 level. You know, if he plays games like that, he's going to be consistently beating people at his level, assuming he can take advantage of their mistakes sometimes too. But just the value of playing solid chess, it goes such a long way when you're playing at the lower rating levels. So let's take a brief look at the opening. So he's a d4 player. And this might serve as a nice model how I handled this as black for what some of you Nimzo Indian players might like to do in some of your games, especially attacking these doubled c-pawns. So he plays knight f3, which avoids knight c3, bishop b4 directly, the Nimzo Indian. Just talking a little bit in the chat. So yeah, it avoids this line right away, playing knight to f3. Wait, how do I go back? I just played a move and now I don't know how to go back to... I know how to flip the board. Okay, what if I click into this? View analysis? Oh, that's totally going to mess that up. Okay, I think I know what I might have to do. I'm going to close this game, and then I'm going to open it again. Does that work? I think that works. Only problem now is I don't know how to flip it. It's in a different tab. Okay, but we can look at it from his point of view too. That's not a big deal. So yeah, he played knight f3 on this move. Okay, so if I do a different move here. All right, now I'm in an analysis board. That helps. Created a different analysis board. So knight f3 here. And after b6, I would say, you know, if you're going to play this way as white, like knight c3 is playable, but you are transposing to a line of the Nimzo. G3 is interesting, trying to create a counter to black's fianchetto. And then black can play either bishop b7 or bishop a6. Either one. Knight c3, bishop b4, e3. Yeah, just developing here. And I do think this bishop belongs on d3. I think he should have developed it there right away. As I've said, I played that myself as white. And I think it's just the wiser positioning for the bishop because it helps you play e4 easier later on. And as I said, it's probably not best for black to take right away. Because he played bishop e2 instead of bishop d3, I was encouraged to play knight e4. And I think queen c2 is probably the best way to go because then, you know, I might eventually take and get this structure, but at least he has the bishop pair and he can harbor hopes of keeping that bishop pair too. You know, in the game, we got the same structure, but I was able to trade my knight for his dark square bishop, and I think I was just slightly for choice there. So I do think queen c2 is a bit better of a way to play. You know, let's say the game goes something like this. Then maybe f5, I can try to prop up my knight. He can try to maneuver this knight now and look to play f3 and slowly expand in the center, try to use his central majority of pawns here. But if you run out of momentum, you run out of gas with these pawns in the middle of the board, it can be really tough for you. So bishop d2 I took. Yeah, he correctly took that way because if he takes this way now, I always have the option of taking the bishop. I'm also still eyeing this pawn. It doesn't make sense for his bishop to be there. So it's like this. Yeah, and I think he should try to get an e4 right away. So I actually don't believe rook e1 is necessary or best here. I would think about bishop d3 looking for e4. Also knight d2, maybe he can play that. E4 and even try to get the f pawn involved. If you're going e4, it's really nice to be able to play f4 too as white. Sometimes you'll see games where white gets all four of those pawns side by side. Because, yeah, he played a couple, not completely listless moves, but maybe slightly planless moves, like even moves like queen e2, which he probably played that to get the queen off of the same file as the rook. But it's tough to find a plan after a while for white. Played e4, which looks good. Yeah, maybe here playing d5 is best. It does close down the position, and as I was saying, I was thinking about playing this, followed by bishop c8 and looking for f5, but at least he's probably not going to lose this pawn. So he should be able to maintain material equality. I can try to siege this pawn, like bishop a6, maybe try to sneak my queen into a4, add another attacker here. It probably won't work, though, so I think I would have done what I was describing here. So take bishop back to c2. Yeah, and this was the move I was really criticizing, rook c1, because the rook has no future on this file. I think for practical purposes, he should take on d8 and then play rook d1 and just try to trade down this file. I was going to take, and he can't take with the queen because I pick up the c4 pawn. But he can take with the bishop, and despite the weakness here, he's still in the game. I'd probably still try to attack this, also maybe combine it with an attack on e4. There's a lot of things I can do to try to get him to make a mistake here, but again, he's holding. He can play knight d2 if he needs to reinforce these. It's going to be an unpleasant defense, but I think that was best for him. But yeah, when he plays rook c1, that was a clear step in the wrong direction. I went here, and he decided to give up that c4 pawn. He probably just thought that this was eventually going to be lost. But he probably should still try to defend it. I was recommending bishop b3. And hate to put the bishop there because it is kind of like a big pawn on that square, blocked in by these guys. But still, that is a valuable pawn. And again, with my bishop not on b7, he could try to use the d5 square. He could try to put this rook back on d1, kind of correct his error, and then play rook d5. So, you know, if I just play some sort of neutral moves, let's say, this is what I would like him to do. Put the rook there, and if I take, he gets to transform the pawn structure a little bit. He can recapture this way, connect his pawns. This wouldn't be half bad if he was able to achieve this. I probably won't let him. I mean, even if he gets something like this, I'd probably play bishop b7 and try to make that rook move or trade for my rook on d8. But I believe that's the direction he should go. And I really thought his idea with queen e3 was to come in here with queen h6 and try to go knight g5 and attack h7. But as I was saying, I was just going to put a stop to that with f6. Yeah, and he played a3. I played some useful moves, king g7. And it did start to come apart at the seams for him here. I believe it's going to be a lost position anyways. Probably he shouldn't put the knight on d2. I know that is kind of tempting to try to kick this bishop out, but yeah, his best bet might be to, again, play the rook to d1. Just kind of admit that that was a mistake. And I still can't trade. So I was describing this in the game. If I just trade down, thinking, well, I'm ahead. John tells me that I should trade, referring to myself in the third person. Trade when you're ahead, but I lose the pawn on e5. I also say pay attention to the undefended pieces and pawns. So that's one of the hardest things to do in chess, is admit that you've made a mistake. So, you know, when you play a move like rook c1, I can see why you wouldn't want to later play rook d1, but I think the rook is so clearly bad on this file that, you know, you got to put the rook back on d1 eventually. Because, yeah, once he did this, and I get knight c4 in, he can still try to hang on with queen c1 defending this pawn. I probably would just double up, and he's almost helpless. But, yeah, this sort of hastened the end. And this is a nice little combo. I was saying this knight takes a3, double attack, and I believe no matter what he does, he's going to lose material here. For instance, if rook a3, I don't take the bishop right away. If I take the bishop right away, he defends his knight. But I insert this move, bishop c4, which really messes with his coordination. Again, that d-file comes back to haunt him. He can't use the d-file. He can't play his queen here or here to help defend the bishop. He'd have to run away, let's say queen back to e3 or something, and then I can snatch that guy. And that's similar to the game. Even in the game, the bishop was defended again, but it didn't matter because when his rook left, his queen left the second rank, his rook was all of a sudden overloaded. And then very straightforward from there. But I'm glad I noticed queen takes f2, because I know you guys would be yelling at me. You probably already were when I didn't see it for about 10 seconds. No, longer than that. It took me at least 30 seconds or something to see that. So, but yeah, I think queen c5 is probably just the most brutal way to get the job done here. Can't defend f2. Rook e3 is illegal. So, yeah, you can't do this because I'm just coming in for the checkmate. Okay, so thanks again. All is lost in the end. Really appreciate you following my content. Thanks to all you guys, the viewers. Hope this video was helpful. Again, this is the Climbing the Rating Ladder series. These are instructional games where I play lower rated players and I explain my thought process along the way and try to suggest areas where they can improve. And nice to play a viewer, especially a viewer who's not using assistants. I know the vast majority of you guys are clean players, as you should be. Don't use assistants in chess. Just an unfortunate circumstance that my opponent did last time, despite being a viewer. That always sucks. So, thanks again, guys. Appreciate it, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Bye, guys. Have a good week.